When I bought a new house, out of the blue, a truckload of stuff arrived. Bob said loudly, "From today, you're supporting my parents. If you have a problem with it, we're gonna divorce." And he snorted proudly. Finally, I can really divorce him. I won't have to suffer anymore. Thinking that, tears unexpectedly welled up in my eyes. Seeing me cry, Bob looked puzzled and leaned in, examining my face. It was always Bob who acted without considering others. So, I should be allowed to speak my mind. All right then, I'll proceed with the divorce paperwork. You're lying. I placed the business card of the divorce attorney I had on hand on the table. Bob looked shocked, his eyes darting around as if he didn't know what to say. I can't put up with Bob's selfishness. He never listens and never reflects on his actions. I don't want to be with someone like that. Seeing that Bob wasn't accepting the idea of divorce, I decided to tell him something. Hearing that name, Bob looked terrified. When I spoke to that person and explained the situation, Bob just kept making excuses. My name is Katherine Johnson, a 32-year-old woman. I work as an office employee. On the other hand, my husband, Bob Johnson, works in elderly care on a shift basis. I work regular hours, but Bob switches between day and night shifts. We met back in high school when Bob transferred to my school. He was a hard worker in middle school, participating in extracurricular activities and was part of the main team since freshman year. The high school I attended was known for its strong focus on clubs and teams. They always secured the top 3 positions in any competition. Not only in clubs, but the school also had students who excelled academically. I wasn't sure if it was the natural environment or if the teachers made it that way, but it was a great setup for someone like me who wanted to go to college. Then, one day, a transfer student came to our classroom. The room was buzzing with excitement about whether the transfer student was a boy or girl, and during the morning assembly, the student was introduced. Following the teacher's instruction, the transfer student introduced himself. "I'm Bob Johnson. Nice to meet you all." "All right, everyone, be nice to him. Bob, take that empty seat at the back." "Yes, got it." Bob walked over and took the seat next to mine. Later, the teacher assigned me to show Bob around the school. From that day, Bob and I started talking a lot. He was quiet and I, hating silence, would always start conversations. Seeing this, our classmates would sometimes ask if we were dating. One day, out of the blue, Bob casually said, "Yeah, we're dating. Didn't you know?" Which caught me by surprise. From there, we naturally started our relationship. We went out for dinners, movies, and had a lot of fun together. I was happy. After high school, I chose to work instead of going to college. Bob was insistent that we live together. Given our long relationship since high school, moving in together and eventually getting married was smooth. Then one day, Bob started working in elderly care. He said it was because his mother had worked in the same field. Although he avoided working in the same facility as his mom, they seemed to have a close relationship where he'd often seek advice about his job. Lately, he's been saying that he's having issues with his father. I asked him to tell me more, but Bob never really shared the details. I confided in my childhood friend, Mike, about all these issues. Of course, I didn't meet him personally, but decided to visit the mental clinic where he works as a counselor. Mike still had that same smile he had back in high school. He gives off that classic good guy vibe. Now, he's a certified psychologist and works as a counselor. From my perspective, Mike is truly remarkable. "Mike, you're amazing. So, you're a counselor, right? You listen to people's problems because you have it all figured out?" "No, I just want to help people." "Katherine, are things not going well with Bob?" "Yeah, there seems to be something going on with Bob's parents. He keeps things from me and won't tell me anything." Hearing this, Mike hummed thoughtfully. Seeing him concerned, I continued talking about Bob. Back in our 20s, right after we got married, our house felt so cold, unlike a newlywed's home. When I returned home, Bob never greeted me with a welcome back. We ate meals separately and just adjusted our sleep schedules for work. I never thought our marriage would become so cold. So, I prioritized my happiness over enduring this life. But Bob refused. He raised his voice and looked down on me, saying, "You won't leave me. You loved me when we started dating, didn't you?" "Yeah, but isn't it strange for a couple to not talk? I think other couples communicate more." "Oh really? So, you're comparing me to other guys? Should I take that as you cheating?" "Wait, what? What are you talking about?" His confusing words truly baffled me. We were just discussing our relationship. Why is he bringing up cheating just because I mentioned how other couples behave? It's a big misunderstanding. This isn't about cheating. The real issue is I don't understand what Bob is thinking. Wouldn't it be easier for both of us if we just divorced? I explained all this to Mike. Isn't it pretty serious if you want to divorce but can't? But Mike just nodded, listening without judging, and started typing on his computer. "Everything you've told me is securely stored, Catherine. I'll contact you once I figure out a solution." Honestly, after hearing all this, I think divorce might be the best option, Mike said as he gently closed his laptop and put it into his briefcase. He inputs the data on the computer to ensure maximum privacy. Mike agreed to help me find a solution. I felt deeply grateful. Having someone by your side feels so comforting. "See you next appointment then." "Thanks, Mike." "You're welcome." I left and headed home. Honestly, I dreaded going back. Even if I got medicine from the clinic, it wouldn't solve the root of the problem. I felt so down. When I arrived, Bob was standing at the entrance, looking furious. I had told him I was going to the clinic, and I returned within the time he had specified. What on earth? Just as I wondered this, Bob began to shout at me. "Come back from the doctors quicker! Make my meal right now!" Suddenly, he was demanding lunch. How old does he think he is? It might be acceptable for a small child, but we're well into our 30s. Doesn't he feel embarrassed acting this way as an adult? Despite my thoughts, I knew making a fuss would lead to more trouble, so I lightly replied, all right, and let it go. But this was just the beginning of the challenge. Even if I made the meal, he'd complain about the slightest thing, like seasoning. You might think he should just cook for himself, but whenever Bob feels lonely, he becomes unreasonable. This had been his way since we started dating, so I didn't take it too seriously. Looking back, maybe if I'd patiently talked with him, I could have corrected his selfish nature. Lost in thought, I stepped inside the house and placed my shoes in the shoe rack. As I was about to start cooking after putting on an apron, Bob had another demand. "I want fried rice. Make it quick, within 5 minutes." "I can't make it that fast. Just calm down and wait a bit." "You have a problem with me? Say what you want to say. You know what'll happen, right?" His words silenced me. This pressure from him was nothing new. Since moving into this house, everything felt chaotic. Bob's dominant behavior had scared me deeply. Even though my parents believed we were a happy couple, I had been suffering daily. I had no idea what his parents thought since I hadn't met them, but living with Bob was pure agony. I contemplated voicing at least one complaint against him. While considering this, I finished making the fried rice for both of us. Bob ate without a word of thanks and then left the house. Surprisingly, he didn't return, and the house became peaceful. But the fact remained that Bob was still my husband. If I couldn't get a divorce, I decided to go back to my parents' house. What followed was a deeply unsettling event for me. I truly hoped never to feel that way again. But what was he thinking? Reflecting on it, he seemed purely selfish. Upon reaching my parents' house, they allowed me to stay after I explained why I couldn't divorce Bob. Days passed as I thought of ways to possibly divorce him. The definitive terrible event happened about 6 months after separating from Bob. I received a call on my cell phone. The caller was Bob. Why would he contact me all of a sudden? Did something happen? After all, we're still technically a couple, so it's natural to worry. With that in mind, I answered Bob's call. Hello, it's Catherine. What do you want? Hey Catherine, long time no talk. I heard you bought a new house. Mind if I come check it out? Hearing Bob's cheerful voice after so long took me by surprise. I must be imagining things. It's probably just because I knew the old Bob that I felt this way. I took a deep breath and replied. How did you find out about the new house? I never told you anything. Oh, I heard it from your dad. He said you built a huge house. Your dad's so nice. What? I never heard anything about this. To begin with, my family's house was quite old, built in the early 20th century, and had been regularly repaired. But due to financial constraints, my parents agreed with my suggestion to build a new house. And so, while setting a budget, I started preparations to build the new house. However, it's the house I'm buying. To fund the construction of the new house, I had been saving a little bit every month. I had tried to keep it a secret from Bob and never mentioned buying a new house. But what would happen if a selfish person like Bob found out? Fearing the worst, I discussed it with my parents. Who was on the phone? It was Bob. Hey, Dad, I know I shouldn't doubt, but did you tell Bob about the new house? I didn't say a word. He's still an outsider. The decision to build the new house was something we decided as a family. Thought so. I murmured. When I checked with my mother, she said she hadn't met him since the time he came over to greet us. This suggests that Bob might have heard about it from somewhere. We, as a family, thought it was necessary to discuss this with a lawyer. We decided to consult with a lawyer we knew, who's renowned for being exceptional. That being said, we needed to move our belongings to the new house. Come moving day, we had finally finished transporting all our items. But suddenly, a huge load of stuff arrived. Wondering what it was, I turned around to find Bob checking out the interior of the new house. From today on, you're supporting my parents. If you have a problem with that, we're getting divorced. He said. He said it loudly, snorted with satisfaction, and I smiled back, genuinely relieved. Finally, a real chance to get a divorce. No more suffering. The thought alone made me tear up. Seeing me suddenly cry, Bob looked puzzled and stared. Bob had always been the one acting selfishly. So, I thought I had every right to speak harshly to him. All right, I'm gonna start the divorce proceedings now. Huh? Don't lie. I placed the business card of the divorce lawyer I had on hand onto the table. Bob looked shocked and uneasy. I couldn't put up with Bob's selfishness. He never tried to understand my feelings or reconsider his own. I didn't want to be with someone like that. From now on, let's discuss matters through the lawyer. If you're going to complain about me not being able to support your parents, Bob, then we might as well get a divorce, right? No, wait. Don't take it so seriously. Okay? When was I not serious? Most of the time, I was the one bringing up divorce. To Bob, who was consistently refusing to accept the divorce, I decided to share something additional. That piece of information was about my dedicated counselor, Mike. Ever since we separated, I had been attending counseling sessions about once a month. The things he told me during those sessions genuinely shocked me. Mike suggested that instead of being codependent on Bob, it seemed more like I had been brainwashed. Such matters might be better explained if the person themselves was present. I immediately called Mike. Typically, a counselor shouldn't come over just because they're called, but I knew Mike had the day off today. Just by telling him how close we've become, he'd understand the relationship we've built. I heard the sound of Mike, who had been waiting at my childhood home, pulling up in his car to the new house. Reacting to that noise, Bob stood up and looked outside, appearing utterly shocked. Mike and I, when it comes down to it, have been childhood friends. During our counseling sessions, he often suggested he wanted to help me in some way. I couldn't recall when it started, but he seemed to have always had feelings for me. Mike, my childhood friend who just walked into the house, briefly looked Bob up and down. Then, after taking a few deep breaths, he began questioning Bob. Mike opened up his laptop, checking something. Sneaking a peek, it appeared he was reviewing the notes from our discussions. Finding what he was looking for, Mike began to speak. Bob, first, I believe it's crucial we have a serious conversation. From the start of her counseling sessions with me, Catherine has always been clear about a particular matter. How did you find out her family was buying a new house? Well, I heard it from Catherine's dad. He was boasting about building a new house. Hearing this, my father, who had been listening, glanced at Bob, murmuring, "That's odd. I've never mentioned it to you, Bob. I haven't seen you since you both came over to introduce yourselves as a married couple. Is that true?" "Yes, Catherine, it's true. I've only talked about the new house with you, haven't I?" Indeed, my father and I frequently communicated, and we often discussed the new house. I'd always made sure to share updates when Bob wasn't around. Given how much my father disapproved of Bob's selfishness, he always maintained a calm demeanor. Witnessing how composed my dad was, I felt motivated to stay equally poised. Bob, however, stubbornly retorted, "Look, I'm telling the truth. I saw you at the local supermarket and you. I haven't seen you there. You always said you were too busy with your caregiving job and left household chores to Catherine. I'm sure I haven't seen you since the day you both visited." But I believe Bob assumed my father would just go along with whatever he said. But my dad wasn't about to play along. Besides, Mike was smugly grinning, having helped me gather evidence. It wasn't like I'd been living a quiet life with my parents whilst separated from Bob. Having shared our entire marital situation, we'd planned our strategy together. Additionally, there was another concern, Bob's parents. I wanted to know the reason behind Bob's claim of supporting his parents. Conveying my concerns to Mike, he immediately called a lawyer he'd previously arranged. Clueless Bob watched our exchange, looking rather flustered. Shortly after, the doorbell rang, signaling the arrival of our lawyer. Upon Mike's invitation, the lawyer entered our living room. "Pleased to meet you. My name is Jonathan Peterson. Today, I'm here to discuss Bob's attitude towards Catherine and the divorce proceedings." "Hold on. This doesn't make sense. Catherine, why didn't you consult with me? Aren't we a couple? We should have talked this out." No matter how much Bob pleaded in his trembling voice, it wouldn't heal the emotional scars he inflicted on me. It was time for me to stand my ground. I want the freedom to choose who I'm with, and I certainly don't want someone like you again. With our family's tense atmosphere, the lawyer began to explain in a matter-of-fact tone. Firstly, regarding Bob's behavior towards Catherine. She got fed up with his constant complaints, proposed a divorce, but he refused. Catherine, is that correct? Yes, it is. Understood. From my findings, I've noticed something crucial. Before addressing the separation, there's another pressing matter. Are you willing to listen? Of course, if it's important, I'd want to hear it. Nodding slightly, I uttered a simple, "Please proceed." And the lawyer nodded in response. To begin with, Bob's parents are in a dire situation. His father has an illness, leaving him immobile. He's been undergoing physical therapy at home but has grown irritable, yelling irrationally. As for his mother, like Bob, she worked in caregiving but faced multiple workplace issues and was eventually forced to resign. This is the first time I've heard that story. I was told that Bob wanted to pursue a caregiving profession because his mother was in the field. I had admired him for that, but it turns out that wasn't the whole story. Moreover, now I understand why he wouldn't discuss his father's situation in detail. It was because his father had become unable to walk due to an illness and had been treated horribly. I feel a bit sorry for him knowing that, but it seems there's more to it. The lawyer's expression darkened in an instant. Catching a quick glance from the lawyer, I nodded resolutely. "Bob, there was a 6-month period where Catherine didn't come home, right?" Our investigations during that time revealed you were having an affair. Maybe you were stressed from your caregiving job, not having a decent family to return to, and always getting complaints from your wife. You frequented bars, drank heavily, spent nights with women in hotels, and even racked up debt. I was shocked by the lawyer's revelations. Doing such things behind my back. I truly felt that choosing divorce was the right decision. But after all, he was the person I had once deeply loved and chose to marry. It was impossible not to feel devastated, and tears started to flow. Mike and my parents stood by my side, as if shielding me. On the other hand, Bob looked shattered, every secret exposed. He looked at me, seemingly asking for help, but I turned away. Also, regarding the matter of Bob arriving here with all his belongings. Unfortunately, without the homeowner Catherine's permission, he's not allowed to just enter. He needs to reflect on his actions, agree to the divorce papers, and we're gonna need assurance that he won't interfere anymore. I admit it was wrong to come without notice. But I still love you, Catherine. I won't make you uncomfortable again. Please stay with me. Catherine. It's pointless, isn't it? If Bob's parents aren't reasonable, then Catherine's parents' opinions will be prioritized. After our discussions, it was determined that protecting Catherine is the utmost priority. If you'll agree to the divorce, we're willing to let it go. I'll convey this on Catherine's behalf. Seeing this, Bob looked defeated. With a face full of despair, Bob nodded in agreement, and his actions were closely watched by me, my parents, and Mike. Bob finally agreed to the divorce, and we all breathed a sigh of relief. I have nothing but gratitude for my parents and Mike for their support. I sincerely said, "Thank you." Afterward, I moved out of the house we once shared, leaving Bob behind. He was now responsible for all the housework. Moreover, Bob's parents moved in, and his mother began to boss him around to care for his father. Since he no longer had time for his caregiving job, he quit and began to work part-time. With his existing debts, anyone could guess he was struggling. Being constantly behind on monthly payments, Bob's spirits were down. And while Mike works at a mental health clinic, he seems to have made up his mind not to counsel Bob. Back in high school, when Bob had transferred to our school, he was a very quiet person. Even to Mike, Bob didn't seem to have a bad personality. However, when treated horribly by those around him, his character became twisted. Relationships, whether with spouses, friends, or lovers, influence us greatly. You can be influenced, but not trying to correct your wrongs isn't right. Mike commented. Yeah, I just wish he'd truly reflect on his actions. I replied. Exactly, I really don't want him to commit any more wrongs. Mike added. In response to Mike's words, I deeply nodded in agreement. All I can hope for is that he sincerely reflects on his actions. Mike and I grew closer because of the whole ordeal with Bob. Thanks to that, we decided to get married. Both our families seemed to understand and accept our decision when we told them about our plans to marry. Mike moved into the new house I bought. Since we mainly worked day shifts, we often went out. We watched movies, visited theme parks, sang at karaoke bars. As we spent our happy days together, I became pregnant. I felt so blessed living a life with the person I loved. When our child is born, a new chapter of our life will begin. I can't wait to start that new life. Holding on to dreams with Mike and discussing our roles before our child arrives, every moment feels precious. I'm determined to live a happy life moving forward. This might be what a true married couple looks like. There's no point in fighting, I've learned that from my previous husband. All I can think is that I should do my best to make my life work this time around.